I'm Roderick Michael Pikney. I'll be 70 this year. I was born in 1953 in October. I'm an Army brat. My father was in the Army for 30 years, and then my mother was a teacher and taught at every level, from preschool through university level. And I went to either parochial schools or Army schools my entire life. I never went to a public school. And that kind of shaped my background in a lot of ways. I was always in a disciplined environment. And spent a lot of time traveling as an Army brat. But one of the things that my father always did when we traveled was make sure we got to see what was there. If we traveled in the United States, every scenic overlook, we stopped. And if he had 3 days to get from one place to another, it took us 3 days. And we would stop along the way, and he made sure we saw the United States. And we were overseas, he made sure we saw wherever we were. Lived on Army bases, except when my father was deployed in Vietnam and Korea. Then we lived in Louisville, Kentucky. He wanted to make sure that my mother's family's from Louisville, and he wanted to make sure that if something happened to him, we were among family. So he always parked us right next to our cousins and aunts and uncles anytime he was deployed and couldn't take us with him. And so growing up, even though I lived mostly on Army bases in a rather sheltered environment compared to most people, you did get to see a lot of things. I remember the Louisville riots in the 60s. I remember when we were stationed down in Georgia. My father would take us off base and drive through some of the areas and say, these are the tar shacks. People living in them, and said, this is where you are. And there were times I couldn't go off base and be with my buddies, simply because if they were white and I was black. We couldn't off base. We couldn't enjoy the same activities at the same place, but on post, no problem. So we were exposed to that, but we didn't have to live in it. But we weren't. It wasn't hidden from us. We understood. Saw the colored and water fountains and the white only water fountains in the parks and things of that nature. But I had a very happy childhood. I said it would be considered, I think, by a lot of people, be sheltered, but I don't think it's so much sheltered as that we were exposed to things, but we weren't subjected to some of the ugly things in life, but we were exposed to them. My father's from Ohio originally. He joined the Army early, young age, got his education in the Army, up through some college. He went from private to lieutenant colonel. He joined in the 40s.
Okay.
So he went through the segregated Army.
Okay.
He was in the last all-black unit in Germany. There was still, there was an independent Army infantry unit. Then where he had a company command when I was a kid. He had so he went through the whole transition of the Army from the segregated Army to the quasi-integrated Army to the integrated Army, the turmoil of the 60s and 70s. And so he was there for all that. So he taught me a lot of lessons. He gave me a lot of advice. He set some standards for me and for my brother and sister that I think have really kept us on the straight and narrow, but stood me in good stead, I believe. When he became an NCO, of course, that was back in the days when they actually had, the blood stripe. Someone lose a stripe, so you could get it. When he became a private, I found out from talking to his colleagues, when he became a private first class, every private knew he was a private first class. He fought very hard when he became an NCO to be a sergeant, not a black sergeant, a sergeant. Back in the days when people wouldn't recognize him as a sergeant. And the same thing, he became a lieutenant, and there was still a lot of holdover in the 50s. And so he worked very hard to push through that and to maintain a certain standard. One of the things he told me on when he commissioned me and he swore me in, he said, don't ever be the black anything. If there are 25 black officers in the battalion, and 5 of them are 25 officers in the battalion, and 5 are black, and you're the best black officer, does that make you number 21? He said, no, be the best officer. He said, never let anyone pigeonhole you. He said, what's going to happen is the black soldiers are going to expect something from you. The white officers and soldiers are going to expect something different from you. He said, but make sure they all expect the same thing from you, and that is that you are an officer. Be the best officer you can be. Don't ever be the black X. Be the best X. He said, don't ever get pigeonholed. He says, too many people have fought too hard, had their careers broken, in some cases their bodies broken, to get you where you are. And he said, and to be looked at as officers, as NCOs, as soldiers. He says, so make sure that you're just the best soldier you can be. I always wanted to be a soldier. Actually, the only 2 things I ever really considered being when I was growing up. From the time I was small, everyone can remember me being fascinated with all things military. And the only other thing I actually thought of at one point in my life was being a priest. But, pretty much the same thing, but because I would have been a Jesuit. But I always wanted to be a soldier, always. And so I naturally, just as I grew up, I think I had every toy soldier they ever made. I had every Army toy, uniforms, you name it, I had it. And I would live it. I would set up my soldiers, and my father would critique how I deployed my troops, and that's how I lived from the time I was a small child. I saw myself as being a soldier. And when I went to the academy, I was accepted in some other institutions, but that's what I wanted to do. There's no doubt in my mind that that's what I wanted to do. They separate the minorities so that there's a balance between the companies. And one thing I noticed when I went there was an alphabetical distribution for the cadet, new cadet companies when we first went in there, but all us black guys didn't matter what our name started with. We were spread out to evenly across the corps, and deliberately, and it didn't really set in until I think sometime later and noticed it. But when I first got there, we were too busy being hazed to worry about such things. The academy, I didn't see very much of that. There were people who knew my father, were on the staff there. Actually, they were kind of looking over my shoulder. My father was getting for first year, he's getting my grades before I did. The registrar was his good friend. It really wasn't prevalent so much at the academy. We had I look back now and we laugh about it, but there was no, you didn't have sororities, because we didn't have women, we didn't have fraternities. You had your company. That was your fraternity, your company, your regiment. But there was a fine arts forum, which was about 90% black. And I'm looking back at it now, I look back and a couple of guys that were there at the academy called it the Black Student Union, because that's all the black cadets were members of this fine arts forum. But at the time, I'm sure others may have noted, but for me, because of my background, I was always in a integrated background, that it just didn't dawn on me, but I'm sure for cadets who had come from a more segregated background, that they noticed, that, and it was probably a more comforting atmosphere. For me, it was just, guys to hang out with, and we just all gravitated toward that, So it's just, like I said, my we were we were exposed, but we weren't subjected to a lot of the abuses that some other people suffered through. Yeah, I didn't really study until I had to. I was smart enough to pick up things very quickly and get enough grade. I did get on the dean's list my last year because my mother was a little bit disappointed in my grades. So I got on the dean's list throughout my last year. But for me, it was just, I loved it. I was what they call a gray hog. I loved it. I wouldn't have graduated except for the fact you had to. You had to graduate or get booted out. Otherwise I would have stayed there forever. I just I liked it. And again, I grew up in a fairly, I think, regimented, disciplined atmosphere. And after the first year, it was a piece of cake. Life was good. As one of my friends would say, we were treated like young princes, but we didn't realize that until after we graduated, just how we were treated like young princes. Everything was for us. When I first went into the academy, we all knew we were going to Vietnam. We had to go combat arms, and we all knew, and Vietnam was still active, and we wanted to go. And then, of course, President Nixon pulled us out before I graduated, so it was a big disappointment. But then we all knew in our heart of hearts that we'd be fighting the Warsaw Pact in the plains of Central Europe within our careers. We just knew it. So I went infantry. I wanted to be in the mix, and after I went infantry, I went special forces as a lieutenant back when they had lieutenants on the teams. Oh, wow. But I had known that I wanted to go special forces.
When?
I had known that back when, I think as far as back as maybe the 4th grade.
I mean, what was it that?
And then when I was in high school, junior high school, the movie Green Berets came out, and that was just that was it. That was the final nail. And I talked to my father about it, and he says he told me, he said, you have to be happy with your career. He says now he said you have to understand. And at the time, Special Forces wasn't a branch. It was separate. It was outside of your branch. Didn't count for your branch time. You had to come back to your branch and serve your branch time at each level and get the proper assignments. But he said, so you make up your mind. But you want to be happy? If you want to retire, you can retire as a captain or a major, maybe. Or, if you don't want to be a general officer, then do what you want to do to make yourself happy. So if you're going to be a general officer, be prepared to sacrifice whatever it takes to be a general officer. But is that what you want? And I said, no, I want to be a Green Beret. So he said, okay, fine. My first battalion commander when I was in 101st was the branch chief when I was in my advanced course. And so he hated SF. And he did not forgive me for going SF. And no, he in fact, so he came up for our branch, for our assignments after the advanced course. He told, Pikney, I'm going to bury you in the bowels of Central Europe in a mechanized infantry unit because I know that's the last place on earth you want to go. But, that was one thing I learned in the Army, though, that some of the worst assignments prepare you for something better. I went to a mechanized unit, and then when I was in 3rd group, as Battalion XO, they issued us vehicles. And so I knew all about vehicles, maintenance, motor pool operations, OR rates, all the paperwork's involved. So, years later they caught up, but then, that it did me well. In fact, I found that in most assignments I had in the Army, they showed up later in life somewhere to help me get on, either in another assignment or just get on in life. I've been, most of my career, I was the only.
Okay. That's what I was trying to get at.
Officer. In Germany, there was one other, and one battalion I was in before that battalion was broken up and we were siphoned off to another battalion. But other than that, I was usually the only. my first assignment as a lieutenant, I was assigned as the equal opportunity officer, and that lasted about a week. And then one of the soldiers came in and told me my platoon sergeant, and yeah, excuse my language, but he said my platoon sergeant, Sergeant Peltier, a great guy, told him to keep his goat smelling ass out of my platoon area, and not associate with my soldiers. And the guy says he doesn't like me because I'm black. About 90% of our soldiers were black, but that's the reason he said Sergeant Peltier didn't like him. So I said, well, I just got here. Give me some time. So I called the guy in about a week later, and I told him the same thing Sergeant Peltier did. I told him, and I want you to keep your goat smelling ass out of my platoon areas and not associate with my soldiers. And then I dismissed the guy, and as he was walking out, I said, oh, by the way, you're still black. And so next day, my duties were changed to, I got the arms room and the supply room because we had an inspection coming up. And I thought, oh, I'm being promoted. They have confidence in me. The two places that always fail, they're going to let me, be in charge of those. And this guy named Jim McBrayer, big, pale, redheaded guy, he became the equal opportunity officer. So, but that kind of went over my head at the time. But again, it came back to, there's an expectation of you. When I was in the regular Army, I had a problem because who I was married to. And I was asked point blank by the IG of the 3rd Infantry Division if I had heard anything or had been told anything by members of the chain of command, if there's any issues, any problems. And I was thinking, no, but for the IG to get in touch with me, someone must have said something to somebody to tell that guy, hey, you need to go talk to this guy. I think he has a problem down there. And I did. The battalion commander, there's an issue. He had an issue with me for some reason. But the S3 and the XO took care of me. And then I moved on to a different battalion, and I was well taken care of by the commanders, 2 different commanders I had. But that was the only problem I had. Race, when I was in special operations, when I first got in, we had a lot of Vietnam vets, a lot of expats. You had, guys like Sid Shacknow and, those kind of folks. And it was looked at, are you competent? Can I rely on you? When it's time to fix bayonets and go up over the berm, do I have to run faster to catch up to you, or do I have to look over my shoulder to see if you're coming? And if I have to run faster to catch up with you, you're okay. If you carry your own rucksack, you're okay. That was what they looked at because a lot of these Vietnam vets, that's what they lived through. You had to rely on people. You couldn't take any dead wood, and your issue was whether this guy, I want him on my team. And race was not an issue. As I went through the different headquarters and different assignments, I was usually the only. And
did that affect you in any way? Like, how did you cope with that, or did you see it? I mean, sometimes it wasn't a problem for people.
Well, it wasn't a problem because I did not see where it affected how people treated me. It didn't seem to affect my commanders. They were all good to me. Phil Kinzinger pulled me over to be XO of Special Forces Battalion. Mark Boyette made me his Group XO. I was his plans officer. And they were, so the commanders took care of me. Yeah, no, my first group commander was Ed Catullo, class of 1954. He told me point blank, he was old school West Point, and he told me point blank, I got plans for you, Pikney, big plans for you. And then he died in a traffic accident, unfortunately, but then we got Paris Davis.
Oh, wow.
Who took over as the group commander. And of course, you know, from his background, you know, Medal of Honor winner, he was no nonsense, but he was very inspirational. He really knew his stuff, and so I was again in sort of an environment where you know stuff is going on in the Army, but it doesn't affect you. It didn't affect me personally. I don't think I got any special favors, but I don't think that there was anything held against me in special operations. You know, and always got on well. I seemed to have been well thought of. So, and that's you know, why, again, as I moved on, I was made XO, you know, Battalion XO by Phil Kinzinger. That's why Mark Boyette moved me up to be, instead of getting a lieutenant colonel, and I was a major, put me in as his group XO, and kept me there. You know, so it was, I think it was a matter of being competent and having the confidence of the people you can do the job, which is, you know, we didn't become a branch until I was a very senior captain. I made major late because I didn't have my company command back when I was an infantry officer. I was playing SF. And so I finally got my company command, but too late for my first look at major. So I got promoted to major late. But then I spent a lot of time in doing things in the special operations community, being a senior operations officer, being you know, the de facto chief of staff for you know, a UN task force, things of that nature. That and they looked at, well, he's you know, is competent to do the job. And so I was, you know, I have to say that I don't think my reach held me back in SF. I think it may have been a factor when I was an infantry officer in Germany, in that battalion I was in. The only West Point mentoring that I know overtly, that I know about, was Ed Catullo, Colonel Catullo, but again, he passed away within a year. I think what it was is that, especially in the special operations community, I found that having, you know, that people look at you more as whether or not I want you on that mission with me when my life is on the line. I think there's more of that, and at least that was my experience. I've been, you know, of course, retired for a while, but that was my experience in the special ops community, is that people were looking at who was competent and who you could trust, as opposed to other factors. And especially since when it was before we had a branch, because you were there because you wanted to be. You were there, you know, at sacrificing what could have been your branch time. And so it was also, so there's a brotherhood, which, and also the NCOs at the time would also go serve in units. So you have your E7s, E6s, they would have been squad leaders, platoon leaders, or the equivalent in their branches. And then nowadays, of course, you have guys who can make E7 leading nobody but themselves. And the guys are great at what they do, but I do think we've lost something there. And I went to Special Forces as a lieutenant, so I was a Team XO. My job was to learn before I became a leader. You know, and I had to carry the radio, I had to carry the, you know, G77 egg, and then anytime they made combo, I had to go crank. You know, so, you know, I make coffee. You know, I was a gopher for the team, but there were a lot of senior guys when I went there, and so I did what they told me to do. I learned, and but they brought me along. You know, and then I took over. When I took over a team, I was, I think, better prepared than a guy straight out of school. You know, there are any incidents where there's something said, anything done, I could never say yes to that. And then it was, I'm not going to let the bastards beat me. You know, and I was asked, do you want to move? And because I knew I had to get a command. I said, and they said, would you like to take a headquarters company? Yes, I want an infantry company. I want a line company. And eventually I got one. But it was hard-headedness. It may not have been the smartest move, but it was hard-headedness. It didn't do my OERs any good, but for that particular unit. And as you know in the Army, it's just they can make you the Charles Atlas, holding up everybody else on the rating chart, and they can kill you with kindness. They don't have to top block you, but they bottom block you, but they may put you in the middle, and it's subtle, and to be on the lookout, and I would have engaged. I did engage with the XO and the S3, but I would have been more engaged with those guys who had been more in the know about what's the old man thinking, what's the old man doing. Didn't have problems at company level, but I think when I was a battalion staff officer for this guy, again, I think it emanated from above, and the guy just followed suit. He was going to put me in a position where I can't complain, but he was going to satisfy someone who was not happy with my personal situation. Yeah, I would, you keep your eyes open and look at the indicators, and then find out who it is that you can rely on, and have them also watch. People are going to do things to you or cause things to happen to you, and sometimes it's much more subtle, and you don't even realize it until, and but there are, I look back, there were indicators. The battalion commander, there were indicators with him, and the way he would, my relationship with him, but I didn't pick up on him at the time.
So that was mainly in the conventional Army.
That was in conventional Army.
In SOF, it sounds like you had a very fair experience.
I had a wonderful experience in SOF. I really am. I said I seemed to have been well respected. I was taken care of. I had no problems. My ratings were all good. The assignments were given to me to help me. Father went through that experience where he was decremented because of the color of his skin, pure and simple. And of course, he told me, don't allow that to happen. He said, it's going to happen. There'll be people. He said, but don't do it to yourself. Don't do it to yourself. He said, and so it was never, so in SOF it was never an issue that I know of. Even though we had, the North Georgia Mafia, but those guys are the ones that took care of me. So, Mark Boyette was one of those.
For the other folks that don't know what that is, you want to get clear.
The James Adrian Guest clique. Fifth Group Mafia, basically. But but good guys. I mean, so. But like I said, they always did well by me. It was a matter of who was reliable, who could they put on the team, and so I look at that as that I must have proved my worth somewhere along the line. I put to my kids to consider for the younger grandchildren the academy. I said, consider it. Now, I do have one son who's a Marine, NCO, several deployments. But I told the other ones, I've got the kids are 12, 10, younger. I said, consider the academy, for the kids. They said they don't have to, but I would, now they've got like 30 odd, fields you could go into, and I went and you got Bachelor of Science in Engineering, period. And but which you didn't use ever. But the kids now, they have so many different opportunities. If that's what they want to do with themselves, then that's something to consider. Of course, I'd be on them about their academics. You know, my father's philosophy was his job was to put a roof over our head, you know, food in our bellies and clothes on our back, and our job was to get the grades, and not just get the grades, but to learn. And that was his philosophy, and that would be my philosophy with my grandchildren, you know. And it is. I don't care where they go to school. But that's, you know, some of my best officers were females when I was in the 96, civil affairs. You know, I came back from Germany out of company command, and on the way back, you know, at that time is when they had made the branch decision and made Special Forces a branch. So I left Germany as infantry officer, arrived at Fort Bragg as a Special Forces officer, which I didn't know at the time until I got to the, you know, to sign in, and they said, no, you got to go down and see the SF guys. You know, you're SF now. And so I was branched, and they had taken the 96 out of COSCOM and put it under Special Operations. And so they put me and a few other Special Forces guys into the 96 Civil Affairs to get it green, you know. And before then, it was mostly MPs, and the commanders were mostly artillery or armor. But because the MPs are smart, they say, well, we can get company commands, you know, out of here. And artillery and armor were saying, yeah, we can get a battalion command out of this unit that nobody knows who they are and what they do. So they put me in the 96, and of course we had female officers, the first female officers I ever worked with, and some of them were the finest officers I worked with. And of course we deployed for the Mariel Cuban migration. We supported that, and we also did support on the border, for, you know, people coming across the border. We did in the Haitians, 91, we had 23,000 Haitians, and they put them in Guantanamo. I'm the guy who was the deputy camp commandant. We built the camp. We built the original Gitmo camp. And I was the deputy camp commandant, was for the Haitian refugees, because they weren't going to let all these people, you know, come into the United States. And so, you know, my women officers and soldiers were some of the very best, you know, and this was, and nobody knew what to do. You know, everybody was overwhelmed. These people were coming. They weren't coming on our schedule. They're coming on theirs. And so I learned that to work with, you know, pretty much in the heat of missions, I learned to work with the female officers, and the same thing. If there's no reason why in fact, when you deploy to certain parts of the world, it's good to have, men can't deal directly with women without some sort of controversy. It's good to have your own, you know, who can be culturally acceptable. And that's one of the things that SF has taught me, is stay with me, is that, and it's like dealing with people. My personal perspective is irrelevant if I'm trying to influence you. I have to understand your perspective, and I have to approach you from your perspective in a way that you understand and accept. If not, it doesn't matter. So I have to understand your perspective and work within that. The biggest thing is what my father said, you know, is that you have to be, don't be and this is what I told your son, and so I told his colleagues, don't be the best black X, don't be the best Hispanic X, don't be the best white X, be the best X. You know, and then let the chips fall, and the chips will fall where they may. Some people will accept it, some people won't. Some people will look at you and they'll paint you, you know, with a certain stripe because of the way you look. Other people will accept you for what you do and what you are. But you can't let that guide you, what other people think. And, you know, you can't be moved by what you think other people are thinking. You know, It's like not dancing because you think people are going to laugh at you, but you want to dance. Go dance. And but that's the same thing in life. I can't live my life thinking, well, he sees me as a black guy, and so he's going to look at me this way. No, he controls that part of my life without him even saying anything. I don't know. He may or may not. If a person's overt, then fine. You say, fine. I know how to deal with them. But then you have something to work with. But if they don't, why are you assigning that
to yourself?
Yeah.
You don't even know.
So it's your life. You have that one life. You live it, and do your best, and don't let others influence you. By how you think they see you, or how they even express that they see you. Learn your trade. Learn your trade, and then do the work. Don't hang back, but do the work. Pitch in. Be the most reliable guy, or gal in your unit. If they say if there's one person I can rely on, who's it going to be? Have your name be the one that comes to everybody's mind. Prove your worth in that way. If you're not competent, if you can't do the job, or if you're unwilling to do the job or won't do the job, it doesn't matter what color you are. If your color is a factor to somebody else, then the only way to do anything about that is just to be better than they are at what you do. Just be better. The best revenge is to go someplace else and do better. It's the same thing. If someone looked at you and they say, well, you're female, or you're black, or you're Hispanic, or you're a white guy, so you obviously can't play basketball, or whatever. The best thing you can do is just, one, don't let their opinion color how you see yourself, and two, just be better than they are.